Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and believe it or not, I think we've got the bugs worked out of our intro. How you doing out there in internet land? My name is Brian Trippett. I am the Front Porch Conservative, and welcome to a special Monday night edition of Chattin on the Porch. A fun little live stream that we sometimes do where we invite on a guest and we talk about what's going on in the world. And boy, have I got a guest for you guys tonight. She is a returning guest to the program. But before we do, let me share with you one of the merry memes given to us by our good friend WWG1 over there on Rumble, one of the OG wingnuts from our chat. And he shared a pretty good one. And I thought, don't get me wrong, WWG1, the other ones you sent me, hang on to them, brother, because we're going to use them at some point. But I want to pop this up here because, when I saw this, I was like, this is probably the best meme that I could probably use before I introduce my guest, or reintroduce is maybe the best way of saying it. Democrats protesting the defunding of USAID. You are trying to steal what I have already stolen. Ain't that the truth, brothers and sisters? Ain't that the truth, brothers and sisters? So with that, let me reintroduce someone who has become a friend of the Electronic Front Porch. I believe it was up in Connecticut who recommended this person to me. And when I found out that they were even more local to my area, I was like, oh, yeah, we got to have this person on. And in the times that I've had the doc on, it's always been a load of fun because, we're about cut from the same piece of cloth. And I absolutely love her insights on economics. She is a professor at Marsh University in microeconomics and other related subjects. She is nationally renowned. She has appeared on places like Quite Frankly and other podcasts and live streams talking economics and spreading the good word about why it is that the free market is the best market. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please help me welcome back to the Electronic Front Porch one of our dear friends, Dr. Robin McCutcheon. Doc.
Hi, Brian.
Welcome back to the Electronic Front Porch. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you so much for sharing your audience with me again. And shout out to the Rumble wingnuts. I have enjoyed watching their meme program.
I tell you what, WWG1 is absolutely like one of the meme masters. This man finds some stuff, and I'm like, and I'll just every so often I'll go like this. I'm like, oh my God. But you know what? Hey, who am I to turn down a good laugh? I'll just share it and be like, okay, folks, do what you want with it.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. So let me guess, ever since January the 20th, you and your econ students have been sitting here going, okay, yeah. It's like watching a one-sided tennis match. It's all going across the net one way, and it's like your head's spinning back and forth like Linda Blair from The Exorcist. How wrong am I on this?
Mine might be doing a little bit of spinning, but I will admit that many of my students have not been keeping track of what's actually happening out in the real world. I have a few. I've got maybe a dozen or two in my freshman principles of microeconomics class. They seem to be tapped into what's going on. The rest of them they're clueless. So I try to rope them into the corral and show them what's happening and how it applies to them and use it in the class lecture.
Well, and give it time, because if it's not affecting them, well, I have a feeling they're not paying attention because they don't feel like it's affecting them. However, if what's about to happen is what I think is about to happen, then a lot of things are going to get changed, and it will affect everybody, regardless of whether they're a college student or, they are a seasoned citizen, as they say. But that's part of why I wanted to have you back on here, because I know we're very early into, I don't know if it's fair to call it a new presidency, or maybe it's better to say we're very early into the resumption of a presidency, because, the last time the American people had something like this happen was Grover Cleveland in the 19th century. So it's not like we've had, it's not like a regularity politically of, all right, this person served one term, they were out, now they're back in again. So, the resumption of a presidency is probably the best way to describe it. But there's already rocking and rolling going on, not just in in American financial markets, but worldwide markets. And I want to, as always, try to distill it down. What does this mean for the average person? And that's part of why I love having you on here, is you can take it from a 30,000 foot level and distill it down in such a way that, okay, when the person listening to us says, okay, well, how does this affect me? You can explain it probably better than anybody else. And, because there's always a certain amount of noise and distortion in the media because, one, bias, and two, there are very few people in media that know how to cover straight economic news. They really don't. I can think of some old timers who are long since gone, retired, or passed on, but really there's nobody out there that can do it anymore. So that's part of why I want to get you back on here. Cause we're only less than 30 days into the Trump presidency, and already you got tariffs on this, and we're threatening to do that. And we got deals with Japan, and Mexico's promising that, and Canada's threatening this. So it's like, okay, let's get down to what this means for everybody else. So let's start with something that just happened this evening. And Trump's been talking about this for the longest time, be it on the campaign trail, since the election, and now after the inauguration. No, WWG1, I am not calling Dr. Robin an old timer. Now, you take that back, trying to stir the pot.
Listen, I know I'm no spring chicken, and my students remind me of this on a daily basis, so it's okay.
Yes, as their grades continue to plummet.
Not my fault.
That's true. This evening, the president signed an executive order placing a 25% tariff on all aluminum and steel products brought into the United States, regardless of what country it's coming in from. And the subject of tariffs has been something very controversial for a lot of reasons, because there's differing thoughts about what it does and what it means economically. So I want to play devil's advocate for just 1 minute and get your response to this. Donald Trump is out there on the campaign trail saying prices are too high, inflation's too high, we got to do something to lower costs for people, yada, yada, yada. Now, he says that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, he's slapping a 25% tariff, or tax, if you want to use that term, a 25% tax on the importation of steel and aluminum to the United States. Some would argue, and I'm just articulating their position, I don't necessarily believe it, would argue that the importation of steel at a 25% tariff is going to drive up cost. Your response to that would be what?
My response is it depends. If the amount of steel coming from, let's say China, let's pretend it's China. If the amount of steel coming from China is a larger portion than what we already can produce here, then definitely those tariffs would drive up the internal costs of production.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
There's only two pieces to profit. The first piece is total revenue. That's price times quantity, what the item is sold for out on the market. And the other portion is total cost. And the cost of production basically is your labor, your wages, your capital, your raw materials, everything that goes into making that item that you're going to sell. So if the amount from one particular country, if the amount of steel coming in is larger than or dwarfs our current steel production here, then yeah, the tariffs will make a difference. If, on the other hand, the amount of steel, or what else was it, aluminum?
Aluminum, yes.
If the amount of steel or aluminum coming in is smaller than the amount of steel and aluminum we can produce right here from our own raw materials, then those tariffs probably won't have as big of an impact.
Okay.
And the other thing that President Trump is doing with these tariffs is he wants that production here. He doesn't want to import steel and aluminum from other countries. He wants our steel and aluminum here to be produced here. I mean, Pittsburgh, just up the road from us, Pittsburgh was the place where steel was produced, right? That was where Andrew Carnegie got his start. The unit cost of production was his specialty, his bailiwick. He was the one who started that whole thing. So President Trump's big stick that he's carrying is the threat of tariffs. And so for the country that is sending their product here, if it drives up the import price, that's going to drive up the market price, which means that people will then turn their attention to an item made within the United States with United States steel or United States aluminum. And so the threat is that the importing country won't sell as much.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So
it does.
The ultimate goal here is to have manufacturing here in the United States where it used to be until rules and regulations and congressional, whatever you want to call them, laws drove it away in the late 60s and early 70s and into the 80s.
Yep.
But 3 generations ago, we were making everything here, everything, even our shoes. Yeah. So that's what President Trump wants to do. He wants to invite these foreign countries' companies to come here and produce here. Thus, there will be no tariffs or taxes, or there will be no import tariffs. So that's the ultimate goal. At the same time, he will be setting the example for these other countries' leaders to do the same thing in their countries, which will benefit their citizens. So President Trump is America first, like those other countries' leaders should be their country first.
Very, very true. And because and I want to pop Robert's comment up here that, currently our steel production against the world is low, about 5% of world population. But then again, that sort of begs the question, who are we selling it to? If we're doing it internally, and I'm not dismissing, Robert, what you're saying, so don't get me wrong, just for the sake of discussion, because that's what this is going to, a lot of this is going to be tonight. If we're on the other hand, if we're selling that to ourselves or to businesses or to manufacturers here in the United States, okay, that's one thing. On the other hand, if we're doing it out in the world, okay, probably we're not where we need to be as far as being able to ramp up the production to meet world demand. But then again, we're not the only producer in the world either. So it kind of evens out.
Well, there's another thing to consider. I mean, President Trump says, I'm going to jack up the tariffs by 25%, but what kind of an overall cost increase in dollars does that mean? Are we going from, $11.50 a ton to, $16 a ton? I mean, how much money are we really talking about? 25% increase sounds like an awful lot, but it could be pennies on the dollar, relatively speaking. And you have to remember, right across the street from Marshall University is Steel West Virginia.
Yep.
They are the only rolling steel plant in the United States. Actually, I think they're the only steel rolling plant in the northern Western Hemisphere. Yeah.
Holy cow.
When President Trump came into office in his first administration, Steel West Virginia approached me. We have some students who work there. They're not students, they graduated, but they're our alums. And they asked me to come in and help them with a project of calculating the foreign Chinese steel import and how it would affect Steel West Virginia. Yes. And what they had found after some digging was that China was importing its steel under I'm going to call it misclassified type of steel. And then once it arrived here in the United States, they reclassified it as some other steel, and that was to evade the tariff. So I double checked all of their math. I dove into the research that they had showed. I found that what they had produced was absolutely correct. And I wrote a letter to President Trump explaining the situation. I also wrote to Governor Justice, the two two senators from West Virginia, and the representatives from West Virginia, and the general delegate house, to explain to them, they were all CC'd, to explain to them what was happening with the tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, shortly thereafter, about 6 weeks after I wrote this letter, all of a sudden, all of these steel products from China were correctly classified.
Oh.
And I got a nice thank you letter from President Trump, which was really nice.
Oh, well, cool. Congratulations.
So, thank you. So Steel West Virginia is aware of what's going on, and I'm sure they're concerned, but they want to stay in business too.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So President Trump I think he's doing the right thing, even though it looks a little bit scary at this moment. Besides, how long did the Mexican and Canadian tariffs last?
About 48 hours. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Day and a half.
Yeah. So, I mean, worldwide steel production, we're talking about 208 other countries in the world other than us. 208. Worldwide steel production, yeah, ours might be 5%, but relative to, I don't know, pick a country. Let's pick China. Relative to China, how much is China's steel production? Maybe Robert could find that out for me, since he's there and he's digging, and I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, speaking of President Trump, I've got a question from the audience. Do you have any insight on who is advising President Trump on matters of economics, or has any names been floated that you've heard about or anything like that? Because I mean, a lot of people think that he tends to shoot from the hip, which maybe, but I'd say there's probably some people in the background going, "Okay, Mr. President, you might want to think about." So I'll let you take that one.
I think in his first presidency, didn't he have Art Laffer?
He had Laffer. Yeah, Laffer was on background, if I remember correctly.
And I think he had Stephen Moore there. And I know he had Larry Kudlow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that President Trump is a dummy when it comes to economics. I mean,
true. Very true.
Didn't he get some kind of a business or econ degree from one of the best universities in the country, Wharton?
Yeah.
So,
Wharton.
I'm pretty sure he knows his economic theory, and he's had 40 years in business of building. I've heard that Judy Shelton is on his short list for an advisor, or I think he's trying to get her on the Federal Reserve Board. Not that it'll be around very long for her to sit there, but that's a good question. I haven't heard who his economic advisors are this time around. Maybe he doesn't have any. That should throw a shiver into the lefties.
Yeah, really. And Robert has got an answer to your question.
China produces 54%. Thanks, Robert.
See, that's the wonderful thing about Fedora Nation. Give us a project and we'll come through for you. So, well, I mean, since we're on the subject of people in the cabinet or advisors to Trump, what is your opinion so far of Scott Bessent, the newly installed Treasury Secretary?
I think he's pretty interesting. I found it very interesting that District Judge was it Engelbrook was trying to put in an injunction so the Secretary of Treasury could not oversee the Treasury Department. Some kind of nonsense like that.
That was one of the wildest things I'd ever heard of. Now, for those of you who are not aware of this, which I doubt, because Fedora Nation is probably one of the best clued in, informed audiences on the internet. But if you haven't heard about this yet, there's a judge, I believe out of the Southern District of New York, imagine my shock, who basically ruled not only could Elon and the Doge Boys, my new favorite band in America, which we'll get into a discussion about that in a minute, Not only could Elon and the Doge boys not take a look at what's going on in the Treasury's payment system, but the Secretary of the Treasury is forbidden from looking at what's going on in his department's own payment system. And I'm sitting there going, if you'd have just stopped at Elon and the Doge boys, okay, it still would have been a bad ruling, but I might have understood.
Mm-hmm.
But to sit there and tell the man whose task it is to oversee the payments that go out from the federal government, he's not even allowed to look at his own payment system or what payments are going out to who in what amounts. That's the craziest ruling I have. Well, I'm just going to say this. At this point in the second Trump term, it's the craziest ruling I've heard of at this stage.
Yeah.
But it's like, holy cow.
I think Besant is gonna do the right job. I've noticed that all of Trump's picks they have a mindset and are geared towards far more free markets than even the first administration was. And that's, I think that's the direction that he's taking us. And you know what? Even if this guy doesn't work out, I'm sure Trump has plan B, C, D, and E in his hip pocket.
Probably so. Bessent so far, I have been very impressed with. As a matter of fact, I played a clip. It's a 4-minute clip. He was being interviewed by someone at Bloomberg, and the young lady, bless her heart, and I said on Saturday, I was like, I'm not even faulting her for asking the question, but I thought the minute she did, and the first 45 seconds of Bessent's answer, he just put the whole thing to bed. He's like, look, these aren't people outside the Treasury Department. The Doge people are people who are already working for Treasury. And I ought to know, I interviewed one of them personally before he ever got the job.
Right.
So it's like, you know,
and then he went on to tell this journalist, well, they can't change the code. It's read only, which means you can only read it. And then he went on to tell her, and besides, we don't actually make any payments. That goes out through the Federal Reserve. They control all that. And then she proceeded to re-ask. She reformed the question 2 more times. And I thought, all right, honestly, I'm glad you're just a journalist, but you should have got a degree in basket weaving.
Yeah, you know, it's it's funny because a long time ago, I was going to do a video on early journalists. And when I say early journalists, I mean the people who are the supposed legends of the business, like Edward R. Murrow, Chet Hunt, Dave Brinkley, you know, on and on and on. The funny thing about all those guys, none of them had a degree in journalism.
Yeah.
To a man or woman, not a degree in journalism won. It was a degree in almost anything else but journalism. They learned their craft doing what they're doing, but that's a whole other subject. Now, I do have a question from the Rumble side. WWG1 says, the Fed is not part of the federal government. That's why he says the Treasury can't look at it. Ask McCutcheon about this theory. Okay.
Well, the Federal Reserve is not, it is a private bank held and controlled by private bankers. And if people want to read more about it, they can go read G. Edward Griffin's book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. Griffin is a fabulous historian, and he has very excellent sources. I've been using chapter 10, the Mandrake Method, out of that book since 2004. So I would encourage people to go read that book, or I think there's probably even YouTube shorts that talk about how the Federal Reserve was formed, but it is not part of the government. It is not federal. That's a cute little name to make you think that they are part of the government, but they were formed out of a private meeting in Jekyll Island. I think it's off of the coast of Georgia.
I believe you're right.
Right around the panic of 1907. So there was a panic on Wall Street in 1907, and JP Morgan and a couple of his rich buddies kind of went in and saved the market from crashing. But they also developed a plan of how to use a debt-based system to basically manipulate and control the United States. So if you look at how the Federal Reserve operates, the Federal Reserve buys the bonds from the U.S. government. They give the U.S. government basically a check, a Federal Reserve check. Somebody at the government signs it. They send it back over to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve deposits it in the government's account, and then the government can write checks on that money. So the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell has told us there are two ways the Federal Reserve can create money out of nothing. The first way is just to digitize it. They send $10 million over to a bank digitally, and magically the bank has $10 million to spend. They can just literally create it out of thin air. The other way that they create it out of thin air is this, real quick 3 cups and a pea movement, with the federal government creating more debt in the form of bonds, sending the bonds over to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve pays for them and gives the government money. So, I mean, it's a really fancy, slick bait and switch. These kinds of central banking systems are really only designed to last about 40 years. So we're a good 75 years beyond our best buy date.
Jeez.
And the point is, I think that your listener, your watcher was trying to point out is, if you hold up a dollar bill, I don't have one around me, but if you hold up a dollar bill by a corner, when the Federal Reserve was first created, that corner of the dollar bill, that was the debt portion. The rest of that dollar was equity. Today, if you hold up that dollar bill and you'd have to pinch it at the very corner, that's the piece of equity that's left. Everything else on that dollar is debt. The U.S. Federal Reserve note has been literally inflated into nothing. And if you look at a Federal Reserve note, it's printed on cotton and linen. It's not even worth the cotton and linen that it's printed on, because there's literally only debt behind that piece of currency. So let me, I hope that answered WWG1's question. The Federal Reserve is not part of the U.S. government. It is its own private corporation. In fact, I think its corporate holdings are in Puerto Rico, so people can check on that. I might be off on that, but I'm pretty sure its corporate holdings are in Puerto Rico. I know that's where the IRS was located. The IRS is also not part of the government. It's a separate corporation. But the Federal Reserve note, because it is just paper or currency or cotton, it's not a real money, because money has to have 4 qualities. It has to be a unit of account, meaning you use it to count. So check. Okay, we can do that with the Federal Reserve note. It has to be a standard of deferred payment. Well, if you look on a Federal Reserve note, it says legal tender for all debts, public and private. So check. The third thing is, it has to be a standard of value. It has to hold its value over time.
It can't do that.
It can't do that because all it is debt. It is literally a debt instrument. So no go on that one. And the fourth thing is that I'm missing something. I know, where is Christian Watson when I need him? Jeez. Oh, my brain just blanked out.
No worries.
It actually does hold up on the fourth thing, but it's that standard of value, holding its value over time, that the Federal Reserve note does not do. Now, President Trump has been talking very threateningly towards the BRICS nations, saying, now, don't you go against the U.S. dollar. We don't have a U.S. dollar. We have a Federal Reserve note. So what is President Trump talking about? Sounds
Good
to me
question.
like he's talking about getting rid of the Federal Reserve note and replacing it with a US note, a true dollar that has backing by an asset, maybe gold or silver or both. And Judy Shelton has, when President Trump was in his first administration, Judy Shelton's idea was to have a 50-year gold-backed bond, gold-backed. Well, if you have a U.S. note, a true United States Treasury note, because remember, the Constitution says that the government can mint and coin money. They use that word money, which means gold and silver. Then we can have a true U.S. Treasury note that is backed by gold and silver. So next time President Trump is threatening the BRICS, don't threaten the U.S. dollar. I want you to go and roll out one of those Federal Reserve notes and say, you are not a U.S. dollar Federal Reserve note. It's just a piece of debt. So I think that's the direction that he's taking us. So I think that the Federal Reserve will find itself very shortly unfederalized and out of business. And if people will go and look, they will find out that President Trump actually did bankrupt the Federal Reserve back in 2020. I think it was March 30th. He put the Federal Reserve underneath the U.S. Treasury at the end of February 2020 anyway. So the Federal Reserve slid underneath the U.S. Treasury. So I think the direction that we're going, once we get that gold-backed U.S. note, which will be a true dollar, that will be a true U.S. dollar. I think once we get that, we're going to see the Federal Reserve go away and the IRS go away. And we should roll into what Doge is doing, because when I just said the IRS will go away, I think half your audience went, "Oh, right, sure it will."
All right, we're going to get to that, but I've got questions rolling in from the audience, which I knew was going to happen when you came on. Zippy over. Well, I'll go ahead and pop Zippy's question up here. And he also gave a Rumble rant, so thank you for that, Zippy. I appreciate it. Why is it so hard to set fiat on average worker take-home pay? In my opinion, that would be the best metric to adjust currency value on. Okay, I'm going to let you two talk this one out, and I'm going to sit back and listen to your answer.
Well, leave the question up for me, please.
Okay. There you go.
So the first word in that question is that lights my eyes up is the word fiat. Now, fiat means fake. So back before 1964, when our quarters and dimes were silver, it took 5 quarters. That was the same as the minimum wage. 5 quarters. 5 silver quarters. They were 90% silver. Those 5 silver quarters today, they're worth almost $24. So we cannot set a fiat currency to any amount, because between the government and the central bank, they will deflate it into, they will inflate that currency until it is absolutely worthless. So you cannot use a fiat currency. You have to have some kind of asset that backs the currency that does 2 things. One, it keeps the government in check, because if they start doing this printing money thing, all of a sudden people will realize that their dollar buys less. The inflation will be evident, which is why in 1971, Nixon took us off the gold standard. He basically removed gold from backing any of the Federal Reserve notes. So they could just print endlessly. And the only way people would know that their currency was being inflated into oblivion is over the long period of time. You used to have milk for 15 cents a gallon. Now I think milk is something like $5 a gallon. But see, that inflation takes so long to happen that people don't realize it's happening until after it's long done. Now, in the last 8 years, that inflation has speeded up, right? Because even just under COVID, between Congress and President Trump, what did they print into the system? Something like $6 or $7 trillion. I mean, I lost after a couple of trillion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the second part of Zippy's suggestion, in his opinion, would be the best thing to base a currency's value on is something that holds its value throughout time, which is gold.
Okay.
Right? Because I can take a lump of gold, throw it in the ground, bury it for 5,000 years, and have my descendants go back and dig it up, and it will still be that lump of gold. If I take a $100 bill and throw it in the ground and bury it, it won't even be there in 5 years because it will have completely disintegrated. So we cannot have a fiat currency. We can't have a fake currency. That is the bullshit that our government from Woodrow Wilson on tried to sell us on and tell us, oh, no, this is just as good as gold. See, in 1913, when they had those Federal Reserve notes that were backed by silver and gold, you could take a $20 bill into the bank and hand it to them, and they would hand you a 1 ounce $20 gold piece of a gold round. You can't do that now.
Oh, very true. Very, very true.
Well, and Zippy, did that make sense?
Yeah, and he followed up with gold prices. Gold prices are fake. You can pump and dump gold into the market. All commodities are just as fake. And again, thank you for the.
Now hold on a minute. Those gold prices that you see, those are gold futures. That's paper trading. The real price of gold isn't that. I heard Andy Schenkman say, now Andy runs Miles Franklin. It's one of the silver and gold dealers in the United States. And I heard Andy Schenkman about right around Christmas say that his estimated real market price for an ounce of gold was $130,000 an ounce. But if you go to barcharts.com/metals futures, those prices are paper contracts of people buying and selling paper contracts of gold. And I've heard Bill Holter say, and Bill Holter used to work with Jim Sinclair, who's now passed away. Bill Holter said, for every 1 ounce of silver, there are 200 to 300 paper contracts. So it's like 300 people all have a paper contract, and it's like musical chairs where there's one chair.
Wow.
So those you cannot trust. You cannot trust at least the gold and silver paper contracts markets. That is not the true price of gold. We will find out the true price of gold when President Trump takes us to a gold-backed dollar. That's when you're going to find out the true price of gold. And even you and I talked backstage. The United States is buying gold by the ton. Well, so is China and Russia and India and most nations around the world. Well, it was Ben Bernanke who told us in 2006, gold is just a barbarous relic. And I looked at that and I went, oh, yeah? How come you guys have a ton of it?
Mm-hmm.
How come our gold reserves in Fort Knox have not been audited since 1957? In fact, when President Trump was in his first term, he had Steve Mnuchin, who was U.S. Treasury Secretary. He sent Steve Mnuchin down to Fort Knox to look at the gold. And when Steve Mnuchin came out, reports were his face was as white as a sheet. And when he was asked, how much gold do we have? He said, yep, gold is good.
Well, anybody could say that. That's not an answer to the question.
Right. So my point is that gold is going to be revalued. Now, the gold that this is going to knock your socks off. The gold that the Federal Reserve says they have, 8,100 tons, they're valuing it at $43 an ounce.
What?
Yes.
We haven't been at $43 an ounce on gold in actual value, and I couldn't tell you how long. Why in God's name are we putting at that number? Now, wait a minute. I should know the answer to my own question here. Um, okay, for the sake of, let's just assume that I'm an economic idiot. Explain to me why we're valuing this at something that we haven't valued it at in probably 60 or 70 years.
Well, I have two theories. The first one is we don't have any gold.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter. And the second one is, if I was really clever, I would not want anyone to know how much gold I had. I would not want to tell them how many ounces I had. I would just go ahead and use that 1979. Wait a minute. When was it 43 bucks? Someone will look it up for me. Sometime in the 80s. I would just keep that right there at 43 bucks. And then let somebody else do a little bit of quick math at what is the price of gold today? 2,900 plus?
Yeah,
You
I
know?
think. Yeah, I just looked it up a little bit earlier.
And remember, that's the paper contracts.
Yeah.
Look, I don't really have a good reason. I don't know why. I don't know why. Who was Treasury Secretary in 1971? I don't even know. I don't know why they're valuing it at 43 bucks an ounce. I think that's ridiculous. But I laughed when I saw it because I have the memo that the Federal Reserve put out in February 29th, 2020. It was that extra day in February. I looked at that and I was like, so they're valuing our gold 8,100 tons plus a little bit at about $8 billion.
That's a joke. That's
right?
a joke. That's a joke.
Yes. Because everybody keeps saying, we don't have enough gold. We got plenty of gold as long as it's valued correctly to the correct free market price. And the markets that we're looking at on CNBC and Bloomberg and barcharts.com, that's not a free market. Those markets are completely manipulated because all of it is paper trading. So if your audience is going to go buy gold and silver, you don't buy it in a paper market. You go and you buy a 1 ounce round.
Okay.
Or fractions, but you get the hard stuff so you can hold it in your hands. Now, the other thing that I heard, and I've heard Bill Holter say this a couple of times, is that there was some gold taken out of the Vatican in November of 2020, right after the election. The Vatican went dark, and there was some gold taken out of the Vatican to the tune of about 3 C-17s worth, plus one smaller plane. We're talking several hundred tons of gold, several hundred tons. Where did they put it? How many times have we heard President Trump say, we're standing on liquid gold? Oh, yeah? Real gold? He didn't say black gold, which would be oil. He said, we're standing on liquid gold. Where'd you put that stuff?
Good question. Real good question.
Throw out some breadcrumbs for your, what do you call them? Porch hounds? For your
Porch hounds. There's the porch hounds in general. The wing nuts are Rumble specific, and everybody else, Fedora Nation covers that all. So
yeah, I mean,
yes.
those ones are great. All of your people are good diggers. But what I'm saying is, if President Trump is going to back a new United States Treasury note with gold, he's got to have the gold, and it's got to be more than 8,100 tons.
Yeah, absolutely.
And every other country in the world is buying gold like it's going out of style, and they're taking delivery.
Yeah, I heard some stuff today that just blew my mind. I got to go back and re-listen to it. But let me get one last. Okay. I want to move on to a couple of questions. Zippy said the asset is average worker take home pay. Average worker take home pay is direct tied to Commonwealth. Zippy, thank you for the Rumble rant. Got a question from one of the other audience members. And then we'll move into a discussion of what is a hot topic right now. MT Corner says, shouldn't we be concerned about having meds made here and vitamins? Mm-hmm. And this is going to get in, and this gets into questions of tariffs and government spending and economic growth. But I mean, I'll give you my answer to it. Absolutely. Because frankly, I don't want my pharmaceuticals manufactured in China. And if China decides, I don't like what you're doing to us, maybe we won't give you your meds. Yeah, no, that's not a good position to be in. No.
I'll give you a good example of Chinese made meds.
Okay.
Back in 2002, American hospitals were buying a blood thinner called heparin from China.
I remember this.
And heparin is supposed to thin your blood, meaning that your blood won't clot. And my dad had a stroke in 2002, because the heparin that they gave him clotted his blood.
Ooh.
He didn't have the stroke on his own. He was having some other surgery, but they gave him heparin to thin out his blood, and the heparin caused the blood clot, which gave him the stroke.
Jeez.
Now, we get our veterinary medicines. I just bought some medicine for my kitty. It's made in China too. And didn't we just hear 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years ago, there were dog and cat food made in China that were killing the pets?
Yeah.
No, I don't want any food that we consume, whether it's for our animals or ourselves. I want everything made here where we can keep an eye on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm of the school of thought that says, look, if we can manufacture it here, let's do it. Because frankly, I don't like the idea of being dependent upon somebody else for something that I can otherwise do myself. I mean, that's just me being me. But I don't see how it benefits us. Because here's the other consideration. Let's say that both countries are getting along just fine. No economic problems, no military problems, nothing. And let's just say that something unbeknownst to either one happens that disrupts the supply chain.
Right.
Well, what do you do?
Right.
You know.
Right. Well, people have to remember that the reason the United States sent so much of its manufacturing overseas is because back in the late 1960s, economists began looking around saying, well, our production costs, our manufacturing costs are much higher than, say, what was the third world country that we were sending things to back in the 60s? It wasn't Vietnam, although it is now. But there was, that's right, Taiwan. We were sending a lot of our manufacturing to Taiwan because they had cheap labor, right? So economists came up with this brilliant plan to send manufacturing overseas where it was cheaper, and that would lower the cost of production. Then, even though they were having to ship it back here without tariffs, it would be cheaper for Americans to buy all of these foreign goods that we used to produce ourselves. My favorite example to this is shoes. We used to make all of our shoes here. They were leather-soled shoes. They were tied together. There was a shoe company called Brown Shoe. Brown Shoe made the shoemaking machines. The only shoe, and they made these shoemaking machines so well, and they had such a great plan that they were renting the shoemaking machines to the shoemakers. They were almost literally the only company in the entire country that would make shoemaking machines. Now, they were sued for being a monopoly. I think back in the late 1940s, they were sued for being a monopoly. And so what the settlement was, it was a Brown Shoe would sell the shoemaking machines to the shoe manufacturers, and then they would service them, but that was extra cost. Well, this cost the shoe manufacturers so much that they basically said, "Fart on this, screw it. I'll send my shoe making machines, or I'll send my shoemakers over to Japan." That was it. That was the Japanese and the Koreans and the Taiwanese, and so all of our shoemaking companies sent their shoemakers, sent their shoemaking machines over to these other foreign countries. So in the 1960s, we get these shoes coming back at us that are they're gum soles, they're glued together, they fall apart in the rain, and they're too small. You don't remember that, or it was before your time. They sent these shoes. So a lady size 7 shoe was actually a lady size 6 shoe because over in Japan, women had smaller feet.
Feet. Yeah. Yeah.
So Brown Shoe went out of business because they had the best plan and nobody could compete with them in making shoemaking machines. So we don't make our shoes here. They're all made somewhere else. We should make our shoes here.
Oh, I agree because, as one of my favorite Canadians wisely points out, let's make cobblers great again.
Sure.
So let me send out some thank yous. I mean, I've got the best problems right now. Gypsy, thank you for the super chat. I genuinely appreciate it. I was little. My daddy told me it'd be awful to get rid of the penny. President Donald John Trump said no more minting of the penny. A 6% sales tax increases to a 10%, and so on. Can Dr. McCutcheon comment because I'm devastated about the loss of the penny? Okay. And thank you very much for that super chat. I greatly appreciated.
Yeah. Wow. President Trump said we were not going to make any new pennies. Now, a new penny is not copper. A new penny is something like tungsten. Is some cheap
or some zinc or some kind
zinc.
of a.
I mean, and then it's sort of electroplated with a sheen of copper. So it looks like it's a copper penny, but it's not. We haven't had copper pennies in probably a decade and a half or more.
Yeah. Very true.
This presents a very interesting dilemma, right? Because how many products do we buy that's 0.99 on the cents, like gasoline?
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
And so in my head, my mind was just blown because I was thinking, okay, every single business owner is going to have to reprogram all of their cash machines. And if they have pricing tags, they're going to have to reprice every single can, bag, bottle, everything in the store. And what are they going to do? Are they going to round it up so $15.99 becomes $16? How are we going to do this penny thing if we've got a 5%, a 6%, 11%, 18% tax?
Yep.
Are they going to round up or are they going to round down? I'm not sure. I honestly don't know where President Trump is going with this. The reason we kept the penny was because it made the math work. Although I will say that when they got rid of the half penny several 8 or 9 decades ago, people had to freak out over that too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't have enough good answers for your audience, I think.
Well, let me get one more Rumble rant in, and then we'll go straight to Elon and the Doge. Zippy, well, 2 of them. I'll make them real quick. Okay, I read that one. I just like the aesthetic of tying worker take-home pay to currency value. The feedback loop would limit corruption and make people more aware of average pay and currency value. Esoteric and silly, I know. Well, no, not necessarily silly. By all means, Zippy. Not silly at all. All right. Elon and the Doge boys. You have been grinning from ear to ear, I have no doubt, ever since Trump cried havoc and let loose the dogs of Doge. I have to admit, from a political standpoint, I've never seen anything quite like it. Everybody for years, Democrat and Republican, has been talking about we got to take care of, we got to get waste and inefficiency out of everything. There's waste and inefficiency in Medicaid. There's waste and inefficiency in Medicaid. There's waste and fraud everywhere, at the Pentagon, at the Social Security Administration. Okay, everybody's been saying, Democrats and Republicans. And they all keep talking about we're all going to do something about it. Trump's like, okay, let's do something about it. So he takes a little known agency, the U.S. Digital Service, that Obama created around 2014, somewhere in there, I think, repurposes the thing and calls it the Department of Government Efficiency, takes Elon, puts him in charge of it. So he's not a cabinet secretary. He's just, you're the director of a department. Good luck with that. And the irony of that, the world's richest man is a department head.
Right.
That cracks me up. See,
tech support.
Yeah,
White House tech support.
He's White House tech support. And Trump
Right.
says, go over and check out this agency. And no sooner do Elon and his Doge boys get inside the guts of an agency, and they are turning over, this thing's going on, this thing's going on, this thing's going on. And as opposed to people, Democrats and Republicans, being happy about it, they're like, oh my God, you gotta stop he's not supposed to be doing this. Blah, 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 blah. All right, now I've set you up. That's teed it up for you. Drive it down the fairway.
Well, honestly, I have been delighted with Doge, especially big balls. I think that, and I think that forcing CNN to cover the whole plight of big balls, and anyway, whatever. So think of this: Elon Musk, who's, I don't know, 50. He brings in this young team. They're 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. A couple of them are just fresh out of high school. They're brilliant, brilliant people. And he brings in these 6 people, and supposedly they're running AI through all of these computer systems to find the waste, fraud, and abuse.
Right.
And they find it. They find it at U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID. And they find that USAID is supplying money, our taxpayer money, to something like 55,000 NGOs, non-governmental organizations, 55,000. And then what they do is they track this money as it goes out to each NGO, and then, bet you a dime, they tracked it back to the Democrats and the rhinos. They know exactly where that money went. They can track money through a computer system like a bloodhound can track a rabbit. So all of a sudden, so Trump just springs this on the American people, and within hours, Doge is coming up with, well, we found this kind of a hinky thing, and it wasn't very long before they started calling it money laundering.
Yeah.
And then the very next day, there are the Democrats, I don't know, a couple of dozen of them down by the USAID office, yelling and screaming bloody murder that somebody's stealing their money. Not our tax money, their money.
Their money.
It's not their money. None of it's their money.
Mm-mm.
And so one by one, President Trump is sending the Doge team through all of these different agencies. Now, here's a thought for you. The other day I'm watching this and I'm thinking, there's 400 plus agencies that the government has, by executive order and then maybe by legislation, instituted since 1913. 400 plus. Now, if you send these Doge boys, this team of 6, even if you split them up into 3 teams of 2, it's still going to take you a long time to get through 400 agencies. But as U.S. Treasury Secretary Bassett sort of let out a little clue, he said, 2 of these guys on the Doge team work for the U.S. Treasury. I interviewed one.
Yep.
Maybe the Doge boys are just the face of Doge. It's entirely possible that we have good patriots in the federal worker system that have noticed these irregularities and are Doge accomplices.
Yep.
So that Doge doesn't have 6 guys. Doge has thousands. And maybe some of these people are old enough to have written some of that COBOL or Fortran from the 1970s programming that some of these agencies are still running on. And so I think this is going at lightning speed, first of all, to catch the Democrats and rhinos, anybody who's been grifting and stealing and money laundering our tax dollars. President Trump is going at lightning speed in order to catch them all off balance. And now they're screaming about everything. I think I heard I think I watched an Elizabeth Warren TikTok about Code Red. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is on Doge's list. Well, kiss it goodbye, Liawatha. You're done. They know. I will bet that the Doge team and everybody that's working with them across the government, they know exactly who took the money. They know every NGO this money went through. They can track those dollars because it's just digits.
Yeah.
And so I'm delighted. I've been celebrating for a week. I mean, I've eaten so much popcorn in celebration. I can't say that I'm tired of popcorn, but look, the big ones are coming. It's not USAID.
No, that's tip of the iceberg. Yeah.
It's the Treasury, it's the Federal Reserve, and it's Social Security.
Yeah.
Now, Jovan Pulitzer was out in Scottsdale, Arizona, and he said that the federal government was giving illegal aliens Social Security numbers. When they came in, they get a Social Security number. Jovan Pulitzer found 10,000 illegal aliens with the same Social Security number. Now, the illegal alien takes the Social Security number and they go get a job. The employer writes down the Social Security number. But here's the key. Elon Musk told us a day and a half ago that the Social Security system is what was the word he used? It was decoupled.
Yeah.
They take the Social Security number and there's another word, but essentially it's decoupled from the person's name and the Social Security number. So when the employer runs the Social Security number, boop, it comes up, you're fine, you're hired. The Social Security FICA tax is taken out of the illegal alien's paycheck, but it doesn't go to Social Security.
No.
It goes to a special slush fund. Now, over the course of this year, the slush fund has, can you guess how much money?
I'm almost terrified but go ahead.
$1.7 trillion with a T. And that's just one scheme. Now, I want you to go, if you got a spare computer, or if your audience has a spare screen, go over and look at usdebtclock.org and tell me how much debt we have. 36 trillion in high change.
Yep.
What if only 10% of that is what we truly owe for running the government since 1913? What if the amount of grift and money laundering is to the tune of $34 trillion? And that debt, that 36 trillion that shows on the left-hand side of the usdebtclock.org, that does not count the unfunded liabilities, which is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
Yeah.
The unfunded liabilities are something in excess of 200 trillion.
Yep.
200 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
What if 99% of all of the federal government action since 1913 has been money laundering?
The amount of wealth that has been stolen from the American people over the course of 3 to 4 generations is just staggering.
112 years.
Mm-hmm.
112 years we have been used as slaves.
Yep.
And every time a new House election comes along or a 4-year election comes along, we keep seeing these rat bastard politicians getting out there saying, wow, I'll do something about the waste, fraud, and abuse. Oh, yeah? What are you doing? opening your pocket and letting the money flow in? Is that what you're doing about waste, fraud, and abuse? You added your own little slush fund like Liawatha did. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was her baby. $700 million a year, and they do nothing.
As a matter of fact, Russ Vought, who's currently the temporary head of the CFPB, sent a letter to the Federal Reserve, which he's required to do by law,
right?
And told Jerome Powell, the Fed chairman, statutorily, I'm to request of you a certain amount to fund our actions every year. Be advised, and folks, you can go look this up yourself. Russ Vought sent him a letter, said, we currently have $700 million on the books. We are requesting nothing for the upcoming fiscal year, not a dime. First time in my life I've ever heard of an agency looking at the Federal Reserve or the Treasury and saying, no, I don't want any more money for next year. Right. I've never heard of that ever.
Just like the Civil Aeronautics Board got shut down by Alfred Kahn. That was his job, was to shut down the Civil Aeronautics Board. I think it was sometime in the 1980s, to get rid of all the rules and regulations about nationwide flying. All of these agencies are going to be shut down. They're going to be cleaned out. They're going to be shut down. So when I said before the show started that my expectation is that 85 to 90% of federal workers will be gone. President Trump is stripping this federal government down to the skeleton. He's stripping it down to a skeleton crew, and using advanced computers, you could make it so that one person could keep track of all the money. We don't want 450 directors of agencies keeping track of 450,000 different pots of money. That's how you lose money. That's how you get money laundering and grift going on. We want a decentralized system so that Treasury is over in Reno, and maybe if we keep the Department of the Interior, we can send it to Tulsa, Oklahoma. We don't want a concentrated federal government inside of a 10 square mile area. We want our federal government spread out all over the country. That was the original intent. We had our Constitution set up a framework for our federal government that was skeletal and weak in nature, skeletal and weak because they did not want to have a tyrannical overlord like they had just gotten out of with George III. That was the reason they built that. They structured the government so it couldn't do very much. And when it did do something, it took a long ass time to get it finished.
Yep.
They structured our Constitution so it would take 2/3 of the states in their respective state houses to pass an amendment to the Constitution. It's not supposed to be easy to change on purpose.
Yep.
So President Trump is taking us to our original constitutional republic. That's what he's doing right now. And to do that, he's got to strip everything off. And so expect a lot more yelling and screaming and crying and squalling and bawling and they're stealing my ill-gotten gains kind of thing.
Well, a couple of points. It seems to me, and I'm going to bring this back to the realm of the political for just a moment and step it away from economics. It seems to me that one party in this country, I'll just call it the Uniparty, which is made up of mostly Democrats, but some Republicans, are picking the strangest hill to die on. We were talking about this backstage. Lauren DeRosa, the ranking Democrat on the House Appropriations Committee, the College of the Cardinals, said the Democrats, and folks, go look this up if you don't believe me, but I'm about to drop one on you. I never thought I'd ever hear a Democrat say. The Democrats are prepared to shut down the government if we don't spend either the same amount of money we're spending right now or spend more of it. Let me repeat that again. The ranking Democrat on the House Appropriations Committee has said Democrats are prepared to shut down the government if we either don't spend the same amount of money we're spending right now, or we don't spend more of it. And to which, and I told I told Robin this. I was like, well, hey, don't threaten me with a good time. Go for it.
That's
Now,
right.
but the larger point, it seems to me, shouldn't we be trying to find ways to spend less money? We are running a $2 trillion a year budget deficit. Not adding on to the debt. Let's just lay that aside for a second. A $2 trillion budget deficit. In other words, X amount comes in, we're spending $2 trillion more than what we're taking in. Shouldn't we be wanting to find ways to shrink that?
No, of course not. What are you thinking? Are you crazy? What do
Apparently.
You want to cut all these poor Democrats and rhinos' wallets off? I mean, come on. What are you thinking? That $2 trillion deficit, that's not for running the government. Look, this is, I tried to explain it earlier. You should go find President Bukele, the president of El Salvador. He explains what your tax money goes to. You think your tax money is going to run the government, but see, the government doesn't need your tax money because the government creates a bond because they're going to borrow money from the Fed. They've got some program, some bridge that they want to build. So they write up a bond, they send the bond over to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve writes them out a check and sends it back to the government. And somebody at the government cashes it and sends it back to the Federal Reserve. And they deposit it in the government's account, upon which the government can now start writing checks to build said bridge. Your tax money does not go to the government. Where does your tax money go? To the Treasury?
To the Treasury. Mm-hmm.
Your tax money is the money laundering that the Democrats and the rhinos want to keep going. The federal government, the way the thing is set up now, the federal government doesn't need your tax money. They want you to think they need your tax money, which is why they keep bitching and complaining about, oh, we've got a deficit. They never once say we spent too much money.
No, they'll never say that. They never
once say, oh my God, we spent too much money. Look at the cost of roads and bridges these days. No, they don't say that. They say, if you don't send us your tax money, why, we won't get this bridge built. We won't get this road built. The children. No, I know. The teachers.
I know.
Kiss my little white ass.
Okay.
They do not use our tax money to run the government because they already use this bait and switch with their bonds and the Federal Reserve buying the bonds. And if the Federal Reserve doesn't have enough money, well, they just go print it and piss on all you cattle and sheeple. Just keep sending us. Because listen, if people really truly understood that their tax money is not funding the government, why on earth would they pay it? Now, here's something else to think about. How is it that right now during tax season, all this is coming out? People are filling out their 1040 forms and grousing and complaining and blowing a gasket over how much money they have to send the government, the IRS, which isn't even part of the government. They have to send the IRS all this money, and it's not even going to fund the government. It's being stolen. And you have to voluntarily send them your hard-earned money that they are now going to just launder all over the place. We went to war with Britain for less than this.
Pointed out by one of my listeners in chat. Absolutely.
We went to war during the Civil War for less than this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And those sons of bitches have been thieving from us and stealing from us for 112 years.
No,
Llama.
Goose faba.
I'm going to need that beer when I get done tonight.
WWG1 over on Rumble says the only reason they, the federal government, require us to pay income tax is to give us the illusion that we are funding the government with our taxes. We are not. Ask McCutcheon about this, please. Well, I think question has been asked and answered. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks to WWG1 for just reiterating.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, and stop me if you think I'm wrong. I think we are right on the edge of a rekindling of the spirit of 1776 in this respect, because the American people may be a lot of things, but they're not stupid. When all of a sudden they start, I mean, the Doge boys are coming out. Hey, by the way, why'd we send this many millions of dollars to buy $50 million worth of condoms for Gaza? Why are we paying for a 3-room concrete building in Ethiopia to the tune of $150-something thousand or whatever the hell it was we spent? In other words, okay, we're spending this much money. We're spending $800 million at the Pentagon on sushi. Huh? What? First of all, ain't no amount of sushi in the world worth $800 million, and there ain't no amount of money you can buy that much sushi for $800 million. That means somebody is doing something with the money, and they're just sticking a label on it. And the question now, at this point, and stop me if I'm wrong, at this point, the Doge boys are identifying these crazy dollar amounts and these even crazier things that are being lined up with them. But no one is yet tracking, okay, tell me where this money went. This is what you line itemized it for. Show me the trail. Where did this money go? If that happens,
give it a minute.
If that happens, all political hell breaks loose.
And that's coming. That's coming because look at the amounts that the Doge boys were coming up with. $50 million for condoms over in Gaza. $153,000 here. Paltry, pissant little amounts here and there and everywhere. Well, what about this? What about this? Do you really think they don't know where the money went? Mm-hmm. So if you wanted to get the American people just pissed off royal, how would you do it? First, you throw them all the amounts. This is where the money went. I mean, this is for what it bought. This is where it went. And then you tell them who got it. Mm-hmm. Because nobody's getting upset anymore about Nancy Pelosi and her insider trading. We got a list of Congress critters, probably 97% of them who have been insider trading because it's legal for people in Congress to insider trade. Now, if you or I did it, we'd be in jail. But nobody's upset about that anymore. What are they really upset about? Because nobody's connecting Nancy Pelosi's $200 million portfolio, with her paltry $174,000 a year job salary. Mm-hmm. Right? Nobody's getting upset about that. How do you really piss off the American people? You say to them, come on, keep sending your money. The kids need it. We need it. We've got this war over here. Come on, keep sending your money. Keep sending your money. And then we find out, you mean you stole it? Mm-hmm. You fucking rat bastards have been using our generosity against us. You gave George Soros $258 million to destroy our country, to bring in 40 million illegal aliens.
Yeah.
For white replacement theory. Mm-hmm. You used hundreds of billions of dollars to destroy us. Our money, you're using our money against us because why? Because we're good-natured people. We're actually the kindest, most generous people on the planet. And you're using our money not just to destroy us, but to destroy every other country in the world.
Yep.
Who now hate us because our government are a bunch of fucking rat bastards.
Yeah. Oh, here's perfect
generations.
Here's a perfect example. This came out today, $59 million to the hotels for illegals in New York City first of all, in violation of orders of the president of the United States, and second of all, when that 59 million could have gone down to help the people in Western North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee that are still trying to recover from Hurricane
Yes.
Helene.
We've got illegal aliens living in 5-star hotels, and our own people are living in the dirt in tents.
Yep. Oh yeah. I
wrong here.
I think you're absolutely right. We're right on the edge, because right now it's a matter of here's this line item and here's the dollar amount. But when somebody starts tracking the flow of the money, then all hell breaks loose.
Because listen, the way that the banking system works, it's all digital. All of those banking transactions, their date, their timestamp, they know exactly. I mean, look, Congress wanted to pass a law so that if I got $600, it was tracked. Don't you think they can track it to the penny?
Mm-hmm.
They know where all of it went. But what's happening is they're building an awareness among the American people so that when they finally light the top of that candle or that dynamite stick.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. And all this discussion about, well, reconciliation bills and appropriations. No. And here's the thing. And this is, to me, and again, you're the economist, so tell me where I'm wrong. This is why there's the palpable desperation to stop Elon and the Doge boys from revealing everything they're finding, because Elon Musk and his team are at a very unique nexus point that I never thought I'd ever see anybody be able to do. They have access to the Office of Personnel Management, and they've got access to the Treasury's payment system. In other words, when money goes out of the Treasury, here's the line item and here's the dollar amount. And Elon and his team are at this nexus of these two things, and they're looking at all of it with their AI stuff.
Whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. What the voodoo they do, they're doing voodoo, and they're realizing this is making no sense whatsoever.
Right. But when the Treasury sends out money, they don't put it on a check.
No.
They send it digitally, which means these Doge boys know where all that money went.
Yeah.
It's not a mystery. And
absolutely.
there are far more than the 6 Doge boys that are working with Elon. Elon's got a massive team. The Doge boys, I think the Doge boys was to wrap the 18, 19, and 20-year-old generations. I don't know, what is it? It can't be Gen Z. What is it? Gen Triple C? I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, whatever they're calling these days.
The kids born after 2001. That's what President Trump wants. That generation, people my grandchildren's age, that's the generation that President Trump is trying to tap, to let them know you're in this too.
Yep.
We need you too. The baby boomer generation is going to start dying off, and while they did not help the situation, they were just as blind to it as the generation they fostered and their grandchildren, and they're just as blind as the generation that produced them, the greatest generation, and they're just as blind as the generation before that from World War I. Yep. We have all been hoodwinked. We have had the wool pulled down so far over our eyes, it's on our feet. And now we're pulling it off, thanks to President Trump and Elon and the Doge boys and other people. We're having the wool removed from our eyes, right? The mainstream media can no longer control the narrative or the story. And President Trump is taking us to a new world, and we're all going to go. Well, most of us. Some of us will be in Gitmo.
True. Zippy with a rumble rant, going back to the discussions about the penny, and actually he throws in the nickel. Suspend the penny and the nickel. Get use back on the gold standard, which would raise currency value. If we can double currency value, the penny and the nickel would be fine. Thank you, Zippy, for that rumble rant. And I saw earlier, and I want to make sure I acknowledge his presence. I saw where the professor, the good Christian Watson, had stopped by. And Christian, we had discussed this earlier, but I want to acknowledge, first of all, your presence. And second of all, thank you for being here. Ask Dr. McCutcheon what she thinks about tariffs and comparative and absolute advantage in reference to them. We had talked about it a little bit earlier, but I'll let you address it again if you want to.
Sure. So comparative advantage is when a country or a company produces the item where they have the lowest opportunity cost, meaning they give up the least to produce that item. So in other words, a company will produce what it produces, not at the least cost, which would be an absolute advantage, but at the lowest cost relative to everything else that they could produce. So I'm pretty good at econ, so I should probably do econ. I'm really not that good at basket weaving. So maybe I could trade my econ for some expert in basket weaving's basket. I don't think they'd take it, but so that's a comparative advantage where a company produces the item that they produce at the least cost relative to everything else that they could produce. Not what somebody else is producing, but what they could produce. They give up the least. An absolute advantage is where you can produce more items than your competitor using the same amount of resources. Does that make sense? So back in the 1950s and 60s, the United States, especially Detroit, had an absolute and comparative advantage in producing cars. I don't know that we can say that anymore.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
So that's just a one example.
Yeah, I saw one more comment from Christian, and I'll get this in. I think it's more of like a let me make sure I read this correctly. Hang on, let me find her here real fast. Yeah, it had. I'm going to paraphrase him for the sake of time, but basically his argument was, yeah, here it is. Found it. The more pressing question: what if most Americans have been conditioned not to care because they're distracted by political theater that plays out in the media? Oh, that is very true,
Absolutely.
Professor. That is very true.
Yeah, that's a very astute point that Christian has brought up, because the media has been controlled at least the last 80 years. And since the 2013 modernization of the Smith-Mundt Act, the media was completely, totally controlled propaganda right from the CIA.
Yep.
So all of your favorite places, Axios, Politico, HuffPo, New York Times, I don't know, you got a whole list of them. You've been reading what somebody else wanted you to think. And it's all been their story. It's not necessarily been the truth or the real news. And what President Trump did with the help of Elon Musk when he took over Twitter is he released the Twitter so that everybody could have a place where real news could filter in. I mean, have you noticed how CNN is talking about big balls this last week? Maybe in the hopes of embarrassing him, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to work.
I don't think that's going to work. No.
So the media is little by little, and it'll move faster. They're little by little coming around to actually talking about the real stories, the real news, and the media that can't possibly change. They can't give up their propaganda and brainwashing. They'll just go away.
Yeah,
they'll just die. And I think I read somewhere that President Trump canceled the contracts of almost every mainstream media source.
Well, that gets to something else. Going back to the USAID scandal. Now, for people who don't know, USAID is short for United States Agency for International Development. It was created in the early 1960s by an act of Congress and then by executive order or
The other way around.
Oh, I'm
Other way
sorry. I'm sorry. Other way around. And its job on paper is to disperse civilian foreign aid to countries overseas. It's got a $40 billion budget on paper. Now, I say all that advisedly, and all of a sudden, we're finding out, thanks to Elon and the Doge boys, that over the course of X number of years, Politico LLC, which is the parent company of Politico.com, is getting to the tune of $32 million of federal money. Then you find out it's the Associated Press. Then you find out it's Thomson Reuters. Then you find out the New York Times. Now, one could make the argument, and they did, by the way. Politico made the argument, well, you know, people are buying subscriptions to our service, Politico Pro, which is $10,000 a year. Okay, you mean to tell me 3,200 federal workers spread out over God knows how many agencies are buying a $10,000 a year subscription? Really?
Not buying it.
I'm not either, because common sense, which again, applying that to the federal government is a frightening thing. Common sense would tell me it's like, okay, well, we'll just buy one subscription for the entire agency. And, you know, we'll put under password protections and whatever else. That way it's not abused, but we'll have one commonly for everybody in the agency or the cabinet post, whatever. But we're not going to buy X number of subscriptions. Yeah, it's $10,000, which is a grain of sand in the federal budget, but that's not the point.
Right.
I'm not buying it. And
right.
why are these other, and that to me is the more disturbing question. If a $40 billion a year agency is supposed to be dispersing civilian foreign aid, what the hell is it doing dispersing money to individuals and companies inside the United States? That's the $1 million question that no one's hammering yet. Which, I mean, they give it time. It's going to happen because, like I said, the American people are a lot of things. They're not stupid.
Right.
Just give them a minute to put it together, because when they do, boom.
Right.
Here we go.
But see, Christian's observation was very poignant, because what he pointed out was that we Americans, we have been so caught up in the sports ball, the entertainment, the music, we've been distracted. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what we have been told through our media, through our school systems, has been complete and utter and total bullshit.
Yep.
We have been lied to for decades. I think I've said this on other channels. So in other words, you can't only not trust the media, the legacy media. You might not even be able to trust some of the new media.
Yep.
You can't trust what they're saying is the truth. You can't trust what the kids are learning in school, K-12. Roll that one all the way back to the late 1950s. Actually, roll it all the way back to pre-1920.
Yep.
When the Rockefeller Foundation took over the education, the grammar books and such that were being published. The McGuffey Readers, which came out in the late 1700s, were the preeminent school book for a century.
Yep.
And we don't have that anymore. So for 104 years, at least, we have been lied to. We've been lied to by our media. We've been lied to by our government. We've been lied to by our politicians. We've been lied to by our teachers. We've been lied to by our doctors. We've been lied to over our eyebrows. You can't trust anything, even the polls.
Yeah.
The drove me absolutely up a forking. Anyway, it drove me nuts this last election season, because I looked at those polls and I said, they're all fake.
Yeah.
Because somebody was telling the poll maker, these are the numbers we want. So it looks like a really close race. So we can have that horse race. And I kept looking at those polls going, that's horse shit.
Yep.
It's not a close race.
Well, and then you find out that I don't know if it was through USAID, but then you find out that the Des Moines Register Herald, who was the home of Ann Seltzer, and if that name doesn't ring any bells, let me refresh everybody's memory. This is the pollster who put out with about 10 days to go that Kamala Harris was within 3 points of Donald Trump in Iowa.
Right.
And on the same day that poll came out, a pollster who I respect because he's accurate, Spencer Kimball at Emerson College, puts out a poll that says, heck no, Trump's got a 10-point lead in Iowa. What's anybody talking about here? Well, sure enough, we come to find out that, thanks to Elon and the Doge Boys, that the Des Moines Register Herald was getting money on the government dime. It's like, it's, now you've got pollsters. Matter of fact, there was a discussion the other day between Mark Mitchell of Rasmussen and Rich Barris, the People's Pundit, asking the question, wait a minute, you mean these pollsters are on the public dime out there defaming our work, defaming, our results, publishing results that are patently false and injuring our ability to do business? Do we have and they're just kicking it around. They're asking the question, do we have the right to sue these people?
Maybe.
And then frankly, I'm like, well, okay, sounds like you got a case of injury to me.
You can sue a ham sandwich, sue the pollsters for lying.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, we have been living in the most corrupt environment ever in the history of man. Yep. It is everywhere. Everywhere you look is this malignant, cancerous evil, and it's got to be cut out. We've been lied to, and that's why I keep saying you cannot trust anything. Look, I printed up stuff from Zero Hedge today. I printed up the Bureau of Labor Statistics January jobs report. I think I said on your program, and I've said on other programs, that the jobs numbers that we have been getting out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, at least from the fall of 2021, have been bogus.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt about that.
And I think I said, I don't remember if it was on your show, but I know it was on somebody else's show. I said the very first jobs report that comes out after President Trump gets inaugurated is going to knock your socks off. Well, It turns out, shocker, it turns out that the Bureau of Labor Statistics has been misreporting the jobs numbers to the tune of minus 629,000 every month on average for at least the last 12 months. Want some more good news?
Sure.
It is probable that we have 32 million illegal aliens in our country. And for the last 6 years, all of the full-time jobs, nearly all, 99.99%, have gone to foreign-born workers.
That's crazy.
And by the time we get to the March jobs report, after the Doge boys go through the Bureau of Labor Statistics and start ripping that all apart, maybe we'll finally get some numbers some honest numbers. But see, that's the thing. Our country has been the amount of dishonesty and treachery and debauchery and lying has been going on for 170 years. And we're drowning in it. This cancerous, malignant tumor that we call our federal government, it has to go.
And that to me, and kind of leads into last topic. as we're bringing the train into the station, which, by the way, thank you everybody for the questions, the super chats, the Rumble rants, everything. You guys have been on fire tonight and in so many different ways. But here's the thing that I am fascinated to watch, because I thought one of the most interesting aspects of 2024 was the stark contrast. In other words, here's one vision of the American experiment. Here's the other vision. In other words, 4 years of Trump, 4 years of Biden, and take away their names. Take away their names. Let's just talk about the economic systems. Okay. One of them is command and control by the state, and the other is a mostly free market. Okay. With a little more intervention than I like, but you get the general idea. The inflation right now is still running higher than it should. And as you wisely point out during your last visit, it's not so much that the inflation has stopped or slowed. It's just, here's inflation. Now another month is some more inflation, and another month is some more inflation on top of that inflation, et cetera, and so on. Currently, it's being kicked around. Okay, how do we extend the Trump tax cuts that are set to expire soon? Plus, how do we put more economic growth in by way of reducing taxes? In your opinion, because the inflation, I've heard some economists, for what it's worth, and unless we wring the government spending out, we're not going to get inflation under control. How much economic impact do tax cuts have, short and long term, to economic growth? And how much control of government spending can we do with it? I guess that's my question, because I don't think, well, it's possible more and more. The more I'm starting to wonder if we really can't get the budget balanced.
You can't.
On the basis of yeah.
Your assumption is we're going to keep using the Federal Reserve note. You cannot have no inflation when the entire currency that you're using is so easily inflatable.
Yeah.
So you have to get rid of that. You can't cut government spending when the 99% of the government spending is basically money laundering and grift. You can't cut it because those rats are going to, they want their money, right? The whole idea behind we've got to cut government spending or slow it down, or all of that is based on the system that you and I grew up in. That system is rotten. It is rotten to the core. It is an apple full of worms. You can't fix it. It has to be gotten rid of. You have to start over, which is why President Trump is ripping the federal government apart by the roots. He's ripping it all apart, and he's taking us back to a constitutional republic where there are 19 functions of government and no more, where the government can mint and coin its own money, where it doesn't have a central bank. Because the government that we have right now, it's like, have you ever heard that phrase, you can't fix stupid?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to cut government spending, rein in costs, and keep inflation low is like fixing stupid. We got to stop doing it. And that's exactly what President Trump is not trying to fix stupid. He's throwing it out in the shitter. And he's going to give us a government that isn't stupid, that can be fixed, that will respond to its citizens and its constituents. Because what we've got right now is not the government that we had in 1791. It's not the same
True.
government.
Absolutely.
So you can't fix this monstrosity that we have. Throw it away and start with the one that we had. That was a good one. It's a republic if you can keep it.
If you can keep it. And that's going to be the $1 million question, is because the kind of changes that need to happen, and I don't disagree with you, by the way. I think you're absolutely right. But the $1 million question is, can Trump pull it off fast enough
Yes.
to make it politically palatable enough
Yes.
before his opposition grinds him to a halt? And
he doesn't have any opposition because he's stealing all of their ill-gotten gains. That monster in Washington, D.C., that deep state monster, the only power it had was its money. And what's happening to the deep state's money? Trump's taking it away.
It's being cut off.
He doesn't have any opposition because they need their money to oppose him. They don't have their media. They don't have their Twitter. They don't have their Facebook. They don't have their tech billionaires. They don't have shit. They got nothing. So he won't have any opposition. The only thing that he needs to kind of massage a little bit is we need to get rid of those damn election machines, Dominion, ESNL, and Smartmatic. But you're going to find out. In fact, I already found out that USAID funded Smartmatic.
Yep. Yeah, the only thing they have, and wisely point out at this point, is the courts. It's the only thing is to slow him down. That's it.
It's not going to. I mean, what are the courts going to say? What is the judge going to say? You can't do that. If I was President Trump, I'd say, I'm the chief executive. You and what army are going to stop me?
And for the record, there is historical precedent for this. Not that I necessarily believe that one branch of government should defy the orders of another, but I respectfully remind everybody the legendary case that went before John Marshall's court in the 19th century on the question of the Cherokee Nation, whether they should stay in Georgia or be resettled in Oklahoma. John Marshall and the court ruled in favor of the Cherokee Nation and said you cannot move them, to which Andrew Jackson replied, well, Mr. Marshall's made his ruling, now let's see him enforce it.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not, and we want something more recent. Supreme Court tells Joe Biden, well, you can't do this and that on student loans. And Biden's like, yeah, I'm just going to do it anyway.
Right. Precedent has been set.
And there's really not a whole lot the Democrats can scream about on that one, because the most recent occupant of the White House just ignored the Supreme Court themselves.
And how many of these Democrat activist judges were on the take?
Good question. Completely good question.
I mean, I think we're going to need a lot more room. We're going to need like 5 Gitmos or a lot of rope.
Yeah, that's very, very possible.
So, I mean, listen, I want to impress upon you and your audience that we are at the absolute best time ever in history.
I agree.
Absolute best time, even better than the American Revolution, because we get to see in quick time. So you said there were 2 comparisons. There was the Trump administration 1.0 and the Biden administration, courtesy of Stalin and Lenin. And you had the 2 comparisons. But see, here's the thing. This whole socialism, communism thing has been creeping up little by little by little by little over the last 7 or 8 decades. And people were falling into it. They didn't realize what was happening. I mean, all you have to do is read Atlas Shrugged and or 1984, that's the playbook. But the thing is, if you really want to get people to see it, you got to push it right up in their face. So we had 4 really good years of President Trump, fabulous economic growth. Everybody had a job. Wages were going up. Inflation was tiny. And then we get Biden. No work, no jobs, inflation out the ass. Oh, and the government's going to tell you what you can do and when you can do it, and you need to wear that thing and get that thing, just in case they're still doing that. Oh, and we're not going to let you associate with people who, haven't had that thing or aren't wearing that thing. Yeah. So it was right up in people's faces just how just the beginning. It was just a taste of tyranny. It wasn't even full-blown tyranny. So now they can choose.
Yeah.
Do you want freedom and President Trump? Or do you want slavery and Stalinism and Marxism under whoever's controlling Biden?
Exactly.
And so we are living in the best time because obviously we made the right choice. We've got the right guy as president, and he is setting things up so that as we roll through the generations, the Doge boys, he's setting into place the direction that we should go. But he's trusting the American people to get off their ass and figure out how we got here. How did we get so forking brainwashed that this happened, that we allowed this to happen, that my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, go back several generations. How did we let this happen? How were we so fooled? So we can make sure that our kids and our grandkids and our great-grandkids don't make the same mistake again. And President Trump has to set our ship. He has to set our ship aright and going in the right direction long enough that we can get 2 or 3 generations down the road before maybe it wobbles. But you see, when you go and you correct the education of our young people, and you have a proper education system, one maybe that's school choice, maybe it's homeschooling, but it sure won't be the Department of Education, and it sure won't be the National Education Association. It's not going to be a K-12 system anymore. You get the right information, the truth, and you teach your youngster as they're young. When they grow up, they will not depart from it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that's what we're doing. That's why this is the best, coolest time ever to be alive, because we get to see it. We saw the past. We lived in the old world, and now we're going into a new world, a better one,
and a much better world. And I agree with you completely. A much better and amazing time to be alive. Dr. McCutcheon, as always, a pleasure having you on here. Where can people find you on social media? Where can they follow your work? What can they do to support you in your efforts to spread the good word about common sense economics?
Well, if people want to email me, they can find me at Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. I'm the only McCutcheon faculty member, so I'm easy to find there. I have my own website. It's linksync.com. That's lync-sync.com. And on the homepage up at the top are hyperlinks to all of my interviews, to my economics classroom lectures. That's my principles of micro and macro and money and banking, and my freedom lectures, which are my Atlas Shrugged class. There's no charge to use the website. It's just our little gift to humanity. Just spread the good word about how free markets will make you free and prosperous, and help teach your children that, so that we can roll forward into this new world that we're being shown and given. Really a gift from God.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And as I knew when you were coming on, I was like, "Ooh, it's gonna get good and spicy tonight." And as always, my absolute pleasure to have you here. So thank you again so much. And we're going to have you back as events unfold in the coming days and months with the Trump administration. Folks, I'm going to be back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. with a visit from Adam from Vets Talking. You might have seen him on Mike Harlow's channel. He's a good guy. First time he'll ever be on the electronic front porch. Really getting interested to see him. Dr. McCutcheon, hang on for just 1 second. We'll say some proper goodbyes backstage. Guys, thank you ever so much for being here for Chatting on the Porch. We love you guys very much, and y'all have a good night. See you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Bye-bye.